Why my eyes, son? You've never used them before.
Kurzweil and his book The Age of Spiritual Machines, like his partner Diamandis, make the claim that everyone will be forced to become a machine hybrid and jack into the AI god if they hope to survive the future. Kurzweil writes, quote, "Regardless of the nature and derivation of a mental experience, spiritual or otherwise, once we have access to the computational process that give rise to it, we have the opportunity to understand its neurological correlates. With the understanding of our mental processes will come the opportunity to capture our intellectual, emotional, and spiritual experiences, to call them up at will, and to enhance them," end quote. Listen to him speak here and he tells you what his true goal for the future really is.
Technology feeds on itself and it gets faster and faster. In about 40 years, the pace of change is going to be so astonishingly quick that you won't be able to follow it unless you enhance your own intelligence by merging with the intelligent technology we're creating.
You said that our ethical system is based on the idea of consciousness. Our economic system has been based on scarcity and friction. What about a world where, as you say, we can make anything out of anything at any time? Would that change the entire economic structure in the world?
Well, we will keep, there'll still be money in the future, and we will still have an economic system based on money. However, I've written that we'll achieve the goals of communism through a combination of the law of accelerating returns and the open source movement.
And there it is. Everything he does is to push toward technocratic communism. Again, the law of accelerated returns is his own made-up theory. It states that replicator technology, 3D printers, and nanobots will bring about a massive swell in abundance that will drive the cost of things down to practically free.
I remember when I was in junior high school, this was at the height of the sort of Red Scare, and communism was this very big bogeyman. And our social studies teacher wrote the goals of communism on the board, and it was from each according to his ability and to each according to his need. And he said, well, what's so bad about that? And we're all whispering to each other, is he coming? And, but we couldn't actually come up with a good answer as to what was wrong with that. What was wrong with it was the system used to go achieve that goal or try to go towards it, which was forced collectivism. A different kind of collectivism, I think, will get us there, which is the collectivism of freedom and self-organizing people who can contribute to the growth of knowledge.
Open source, obviously, is the idea of shared intellectual property, which is his idea of non-forced collectivism. In other words, you don't get to own your intellectual property, but will be forced in this non-forced forcing to make it available to the public for free. But markets will somehow magically thrive because there does exist people who will actually pay for free things. So there's that. You can all relax now.
So, I mean, right now, if you want music, movies, books, there are millions of these items for free. There are also robust book publishing industries, and despite discussion of crisis in those industries, they're actually as big as ever, because people still spend money for proprietary forms of that information. But if you were very poor, you could actually entertain yourself pretty well with the free forms. In the future, we're going to have information that can be turned into a blouse or any other object, food, modules to build a house, and we'll actually be able to live quite well with open sources of information. Say, oh, but you're going to need a three-dimensional printer. Well, right now, you can print out 70% of the parts on your three-dimensional printer to build another three-dimensional printer. That will be 100% within 10 years. And so people will be able to print out, if you send one three-dimensional printer to Nigeria, they'll be able to print out a second one, and the two will print out four will print out 8, and pretty soon everybody in Nigeria can have their own three-dimensional printer. This will be very inexpensive technology. You'll be able to live very well with open sources of information, which will be very high quality. Nonetheless, there'll be robust markets for proprietary forms of all of those kinds of information.
Listen carefully to his straw man. We can make anything out of anything at any time.
What about a world where, as you say, we can make anything out of anything at any time?
Is he suggesting that with nanobots and 3D printers, one can manifest limitless materials right out of thin air at zero cost? Can you make food with a 3D printer? How is that done? He is telling you that there are two specific groups of people in his futuristic world. Those who operate from money on one plane of existence, and the poor who take the scraps that fall from the rich man's table. The World game, a computer game envisioned by Buckminster Fuller, was intended to be the alternative to war games, the machine learning system that uses game theory developed by von Neumann and others that came out of Rand Corporation and is used by the Pentagon to strategize winning moves in war scenarios. Remember the 1983 movie War Games? The object of the World game was to create solutions to overpopulation and the uneven distribution of resources by working through given scenarios and without competing with anyone or working independently. The idea was to, quote, make the world work equally for 100% of humanity in the shortest possible time through spontaneous cooperation without ecological damage or disadvantage to anyone, end quote. Of course, development of the game was never actually realized, its colossal failure never publicized. For the game to actually work, it must first be fed all of the world's data, like the data you'd gather from Google. One can only assume that since this utopian ideal is founded upon a faulty thesis to begin with, it makes the game unable to resolve the programmed paradoxes, which is, of course, the driving motivation for AI in the first place.
Talking about AI, I realized, like, oh, well, this is a genie that once it's out of the bottle, you're never getting it back in.
That's true.
Are you honestly, legitimately concerned about this? Is like AI one of your main worries?
Yes, it's less of a worry than it used to be, mostly due to taking more of a fatalistic attitude.
How far away are we from something that's really, truly sentient?
I mean, you could argue that any group of people, like a company is essentially a cybernetic collective of people and machines. Is there sort of like a collective AI in the Google sort of search, you know, where we're all sort of plugged in as like nodes on the network, like leaves on a big tree. We're all feeding this network without questions and answers. We're all collectively programming the AI, and and Google plus all the humans that connect to it are one giant cybernetic collective. It feels like we are the biological bootloader for AI, effectively. We are building it. But the AI is informed, strangely, by the human limbic system. It is, in large part, our id writ large. We mentioned all those things, the sort of primal drives. There's all the things that we like and hate and fear. They're all there on the internet. They're a projection of our limbic system.
The 1983 movie War Games was an interesting work of predictive programming. The story makes the case for AI as superior to humans, starting with military wartime applications that ultimately brings about the strategy for world peace. Straight out of the Stuart Brand cyber hippie cult, the main character is a teenage boy who is interested in computers and gaming and feels perfectly entitled to hack into a gaming company to sample its intellectual property, but instead accidentally hacks into NORAD's AI system, launching a thermonuclear world war. The main character's name is Lightman, and characterized as an underachiever, disinterested in mainstream education, and ripe for recruitment by the Soviets. He's coming of age in the enlightened domain of Silicon Valley. War Games gives one of the earliest mainstream introductions to the computer nerd, the gamer, the hacker persona, as well as the normalization of certain psychological disorders to be exploited for specific roles for laborers in the coming technocracy, which I talked about in my Ad Astra video a few years back. Astronauts and schizoaffective disorder, as in the case with Ad Astra, whose antisocial nature and flat affect seem perfect for long-term space travel, and neurodivergent spectrum disorders for programming and software development portrayed by the idiot savant they introduce in the movie as the assistant to a senior developer that closely resembles a young Steve Wozniak. Incidentally, Wozniak and Jobs were part of the Homebrew Computer Club, of which Stuart Brand was a member. In the Rolling Stone article, Brand explained that, quote, AI is one of the perhaps several dozen computer research centers that focus on cultivating young programmers and even working with autistic children, trying to get them to relate to computers first and then later to people, end quote. This isn't the first representation of the spectrum-disordered enlightened gamer, however. The first one comes from a British rock opera from the 1970s, composed by Pete Townsend and performed by The Who, called Tommy. I did a video on this some years back. Pete Townsend was a devotee of Guru Mahar Baba. Baba claimed he was the human incarnate of God, the avatar of God. Baba was also a member of the British elite roundtable conferences and joined the Hollywood circles a bit later through Aldous Huxley's wife's connections. The premise of the film was shaped by Townsend's industry handler that converted the storyline from a rock star idol to a gaming champion turned enlightened messiah.
At the time, which I suppose we're talking about getting towards the end of, I may have these dates wrong, but I think we were still recording at the end of 68 and rolling over into 69 with the final work. Is that right? Yeah. And polishing off really through that Christmas and New Year break between 68 and 69. And there was a young guy that Kit Lambert and Chris Stamp, our managers, became friendly with, called Nick Cohen, Nickcohn, who was the youngest record reviewer to work on a national newspaper. He got a job at The Guardian. And he was a bit of a Who fan, and we invited him down to hear the work. This is pre-Pinball Wizard, which was really not about pinball at all. It was about a young man who's traumatically thrown into deaf-dumb and blindness, into a kind of autistic deaf-dumb and blindness. His parents throw the book at him. Society throws the book at him. You know, he's used and abused and used as a testbed for all kinds of nutty projects. And then simply by the miracle of seeing his own image in the mirror and his mother smashing the mirror, is released from the psychological trap, the traumatic trap that he's in. And as a result of that, becomes a big figure in his community as a spiritual leader. Now, that was the story of Tommy as it was. Nick came to hear it and suddenly said, it's good. And I said, you don't seem convinced. He said, it's a bit boring. And I said, what do you mean? He said, does it have to be about this God stuff? He said, it's also passé, In the previous months, he and I had been out playing pinball all the time. He was halfway through a book called Arthur with an F, The Pinball Queen, and which if you struggle to find, you can still find a really interesting book, a story about a young girl who becomes a pinball champion. And we used to play with the girl that it was based on, Arthur. So this was in my mind, and so I started to tease him a little bit back because he was teasing me a bit. And I said, so what about if instead of just becoming like a spiritual leader, like a kind of a pseudo rock star thing, what about if he was a pinball champion? And Nick said, now that would be interesting. He said, but that's my idea.
The book by Nick Cohn, R for Teenage Pinball Queen, is this sleazy, psychedelic, labyrinth-style story that follows an orphaned preteen girl who dresses like a boy and loves arcade gaming. Arthur falls through an arcade funhouse mirror into this carnival-like degenerate world of brothels, barrooms, and opium dens. There, she meets a bartender who is really an ancient clairvoyant Chinese sage that teaches her how to reach enlightenment through a series of degenerate behaviors. The story is fraught with inappropriate sexual overtones and pederasty, and Cohn has said that he invented Arthur in the story as his alter ego. In the film, the main character is thrown into an autistic-like state through a traumatic event where he witnesses the death of his war hero father. The only way he connects to the world in any meaningful way is through the game, and becomes an international pinball champion and then later worshipped as a messianic figure. In one scene, his stepfather mocks him through, you guessed it, more trauma from war imagery in a video game. This propels Tommy to a cyber realm of esoteric video game imagery that crescendos at his father, and who from his wisdom from the other side leads him into the quote-unquote light, seen here as an illumined disc-like portal. This autistic loss of connection to his senses and the outside world is seen as the necessary vehicle for his transformation. The road to enlightenment, or being quote-unquote Christed, means blocking out your natural senses and your connection to the world and all the people around you and devoting entirely to the game. Here's a sample of the lyrics to Amazing Journey, the score behind this scene, where at one point the boy in his trauma-induced state experiences an ascended master and then goes on to be a leader of this gnosis, this esoteric wisdom himself. A vague haze of delirium creeps up on me. All at once a tall stranger I suddenly see. He's dressed in a silver sparkled glittering gown, and his golden beard flows nearly to the ground. Sickness will surely take the mind where minds can't usually go. Come on the amazing journey and learn all you should know. He is your leader. He is your guide. Other points of interest in this film are the stacks used in Ready Player One. the MK Ultra style altars. The use of psychedelics as a form of spiritual medicine. And all the Luciferian, Theosophical, and Freemasonic symbols. Like this one. Did you see it? I'll show it to you again.
Ready Player One. It was the most amazing flash forward and flash back at the same time.
I was born in 2025, but I wish I'd grown up in the 1980s. Like Halliday and Morrow, like all my heroes.
There's a dystopian society and the fabric of our economy is crumbling. It's a good time to escape. So virtual reality will be a super drug.
Again, I think that the biggest question maybe in economics and politics of the coming decades will be what to do with all these useless people. Food will not be a problem. With that kind of technology, you will be able to produce food to feed everybody. The problem is more boredom and what to do with them, and how will they find some sense of meaning in life when they are basically meaningless, worthless. My best guess at present is a combination of drugs and computer games.
Lightman is shown performing simple hacks, which was repackaged a decade later in the 1995 movie Hackers. Lightman is trying to hack into a gaming company called Protovision. Notice the ad for Protovision is showing only males. You know, I really hate to do this because it will reveal my age. But not only was I the same age as Lightman in 1983, I was a first-generation gamer too. And if you haven't noticed, I am a woman. Sometimes you must consult the wise elders of the Nerd Council, and I am here only to serve. You're welcome. As you can see, the social planners in the 1980s were working diligently to steer women away from not just gaming, but tech jobs in general. According to the overlords, women are not designated for labor in these sectors, you see.
Oh, I'm worried about that kid. What? I know, sometimes I think we're all gonna get electrocuted.
This corn is raw.
I know, isn't it wonderful? It's so crisp.
Of course it's crisp, it's raw.
No, it's terrific. You can just taste the vitamin A and D in here. It's great.
Of course, the film revolves around the AI system, developed by a man who thinks and looks exactly like Stuart Brand.
Once upon a time, there lived a magnificent race of aeroplanes. They dominated the world through age after age. They ran, they swam, and they fought, and they flew. Until suddenly, quite recently, they disappeared. Nature just gave up and started again. We weren't even apes then. We were just these smart little rodents hiding in the rocks.
There is an interesting introduction to AI hallucinations portrayed with this storyline. Hallucinations so powerful as to deceive even the elect.
It's bluff, John. Call it off. No, it's not a bluff. It's real.
General, what you see on these screens up here is a fantasy, a computer-enhanced hallucination.
Do you really believe that the enemy would attack without provocation, using so many missiles, bombers, and subs? You are listening to a machine.
Are you getting a lot of hallucinations?
Yes, which is expected. No one in the field has yet solved the hallucination problems. All models do have this as an issue.
Is BARD safe for society?
The way we have launched it today, as an experiment in a limited way, I think so.
In the movie Hackers, the same character profile of the counterculturalist cyber hippie is presented but repackaged for 90s high school cyberpunks. In one scene, Zero Cool, scripted as some hacker white hat, quotes Allen Ginsberg, a Tavistock operative, and of course taking the prose completely out of context.
Angel-headed hipsters burning for the ancient heavenly connection. Story dynamo, the machinery of the night.
It's Ginsberg.
Of course, they tell you exactly who this is from. Who do you think it is? Obvious? No?